Hello and welcome to South Africa on 99.94 Cricket Every Day. I'm Neil Manthorpe. I'm one half of the South African team. Lungani Zama is my co-host. South Africa on 99.94 is your new home for South African cricket content. We'll be dropping into your podcast feeds as regularly as we possibly can, at least twice a week. You can find us on YouTube or on 99.94, the app, several times every week, as I said. So please rate, review, and subscribe. And if you get a chance, do check out the Mitch Johnson show, where the former Aussie Quick talks about his life and cricket. You can find it wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. So thanks for joining the conversation. Today, Zams and I are going to be talking about South Africa's start. Wet, damp start, not unfamiliar to the T20 World Cup. Zams, I'm sure that most of our listeners will know exactly what happened. If they didn't see it, they would have heard about it and read about it. The game reduced to 9 overs per side against Zimbabwe after a 2.5-hour delay. And then South Africa falling 13 runs short. Well, the game was called off and they were 13 runs short. They needed 13 runs from 7 overs, as it turned out. Lots and lots of ifs, whys, buts, and wherefores. Was there time wasting? Did the umpires not get the game on time? It doesn't matter, of course. And, ever since sporting cliches became in vogue about 20 years ago, one of the first that young players were taught was control the controllables. So I'm sure that that'll be the talk in the South African camp. They won't be they won't be investigating how they managed to drop 2 points against Zimbabwe. What did you make of it all?
It baffles me how whenever a World Cup comes around, large parts of South Africa are currently experiencing almost a drought, desperate for rain. There was a thunderstorm in Joburg last night and people were celebrating. Not that there's a thunderstorm, but that finally the parched land is getting some respite. And yet, the one place where we don't need rain, it buckets down for hours and hours and hours. It's such a uniquely South African World Cup phenomenon. Hugely frustrating, obviously. And you wonder, you say control the controllables. The one controllable South Africans have never been able to control since readmission is what seems like their curse when it comes to World Cups that matter, precipitation, and the subsequent pressure that comes from that. I'm sure at least a few in the changing room roll their eyes and go, here we go again. We've planned everything. We should beat Zimbabwe easily. We should get some confidence, get onto Bangladesh, and Mother Nature conspires against you. It's ridiculous.
We're going to do a whole podcast on South Africa World Cups and rain. 3 times, definitely. 91, 2003, and 2015. It affected their fate. But we'll do another whole podcast on that. Let's just talk about right now, the here and now. Let's control this controllable. The South Africans are very good at conspiracy theories, aren't they? And there's, social media is a curse, but so many people have been saying, oh, funny how Australia and India and England weren't scheduled to play in Hobart where it rains all the time.
Yeah, you start dreaming them up. Nothing was said about this months ago when the schedule came out. It was, Hobart, lovely ground, place to dominate whoever is the qualifier, because it doesn't matter. It's just a qualifier. But, as soon as that happens, then you go back 2 steps and forget the logic and say, of course, ICC planned for South Africa to go to Hobart because they knew that on the 24th of October, precisely as they were supposed to play a key match, it would start raining. Of course they did.
I think the umpires did everything they possibly could, and I think they possibly went beyond what was reasonable. Zimbabwe coach Dave Houghton afterwards said that conditions were absolutely ridiculous, and they tried. Another myth to debunk here is that after the second day, after the 9 overs was reduced to 7 overs, the ground was clear. Conditions were not ideal. Conditions were far from ideal. But everything was ready to go. And the umpires were standing there. They were out there ready to go. And we're talking a 5 minute. It took 5 minutes before the umpires called the players onto the field. And of course, South Africa only needed 5 minutes. So they would have won the game if they'd had those 5 minutes. But what people don't realise is that television pays the bills. It pays the bills of the umpires and the ground staff and the players and, ultimately us probably. And if television isn't ready to go, then the match doesn't go ahead.
Yeah, you do forget that. I actually had an interesting conversation with a media mogul who explained that for every major tournament, 90% of the income that's generated at all these major events is purely television. So it doesn't matter that it's sold out, and it doesn't matter that everyone's drinking the same drink. The money that matters comes from the broadcaster. So if the broadcaster has said we are only starting in 7 minutes, that's when you'll start. Otherwise, the bill that will be footed by the ICC will be astronomical. So yeah, it is frustrating when you think you're desperate to get on, really, really desperate, but it's like the safety checks that you do before an airplane takes off and you're desperate to get somewhere. You still have to go through it because you just can't start without it. And it feels like the most mind-numbing 4 minutes of your life going through yet another demonstration that you've seen it again and again and again. But you have to do it. And it's unfortunate that it rears its head up when you need it most and you know that the storm is coming back and you're trying to sneak in. But they knew how much time they had, and unfortunately you can't hurry things up to sort of suit this one particular circumstance, and it's unfortunate for South Africa. And I think Zimbabwe wanted to play as well. There was a great enthusiasm from both sides. It wasn't as if they were dragging their feet and really wasting time like they do in football. It was just one of those things that couldn't go any quicker, and unfortunately, what would have been an interesting start to the tournament, ended up with weather as the winner.
The irony is that if India win all of their remaining games, including against South Africa, and South Africa beat Pakistan, they could still qualify for the semi-finals with less points than they had last year when they missed out on the semi-finals. I mean, fate is still very much in their hands, and that's what Mark Boucher said after the game. He said, we don't have a good record with rain, and him particularly, bearing in mind 2003. But he said at least it happened in the first game and not the last.
This is true, but, the other thing that Boucher wouldn't have mentioned is the fact that the manner of Pakistan's loss to India would have riled them up significantly, so that every other game that comes before then is, in their mind, just a speed hump on their mission to meet India again when it matters and beat them and right the wrong of that opening game. When we speculated just last week, we said that Pakistan may well beat India, and they nearly did. And in fact, Pakistan might beat everyone in the group. No one planned on Virat Kohli doing what he did. But the consequence of that is Pakistan are now desperate, and a desperate Pakistani team is a gilt-edged sword, because they can play unbelievable cricket, or they can do unbelievably crazy things like that happened in the final over. But that's what South Africa has now got to come up against. A Pakistan team with their backs against the wall that feels as if, there's conspiracy. You think South Africa has got conspiracy theories. You can imagine Pakistan, especially when they get beaten by India in controversial circumstances. So there's, that game has become a lot harder. But if South Africa do win it, of course, fate is in their own hands. There's still time. But that Pakistan game has now become a lot harder.
Okay, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about South Africa's wet opening against Zimbabwe.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
Sams, we ought to mention what went right. And I know that it was only Zimbabwe, but I mean absolutely no disrespect there whatsoever. But I tell you what, there was some really good bowling. I mean, to restrict any team to 79 runs in 9 overs when they know they've only got 9 overs. So Wayne Parnell 2 overs for 6 at the top end, and how about Anrich Nortje? I mean, overall, and we saw this in the warm-up game against New Zealand as well when they were bowled out for 98. South Africa's attack is very much at home and very dangerous in Australian conditions.
Yeah, they look sharp. They really look sharp, and that's encouraging for bigger assignments, so to say. And as you keep saying, the shorter the format, the more the game brings the possibility of an upset. And goodness, we've already seen a couple of results in the early stages of this T20 World Cup that, these minnows are minnows no more. They're here to compete. Zimbabwe, as soon as they heard 9 overs, would have been thinking, we just need a couple of really big overs that sort of go for 15 and 20 and really put South Africa under pressure. So to see the control that Wayne Parnell exerted up front is encouraging. Like you say, Nortje, even Giddy, they're bowled with an intensity and a precision, which, if they take that through the tournament, South Africa will be a difficult team to play against because it's kind of relentless. So that was encouraging.
What did you think when Temba Bavuma opened the batting? Actually, I want to give my opinion first. I thought I was fully expecting him, even though it was 9 overs, I fully expected him to open the batting, and I hoped that he would as well, because so much of professional sport is about the image that you portray. And we talk a lot about substance, and it's easy to say that the image you portray is nothing. It's all about substance. But for him to be seen in the first game against Zimbabwe to be taking a backward step, which is what it would, given his circumstance. I mean, if he was in fabulous form and scoring loads of runs, then he had sent Stubbs or Rousseau out to open, you'd have said, what a fantastic, magnanimous team gesture. But given the current circumstances, I'm really glad that he didn't take a step back.
Yeah, I didn't expect any different. I think it would have just spoken of panic and pressure and everything else, which then raises more questions. You've been backed, your selectors backed you, your coaches backed you, you back yourself. That's your job. You picked as an opener, and there've been long discussions saying the only place to play is as an opener. So if you suddenly change that, then you really open up the possibility of actually why are you in the team then if you can just float. So I wasn't surprised, and I think it's unfortunate that he basically became a spectator because Quinton de Kock decided to go ballistic. So there's nothing to be said about Temba's performance because there was almost a non-performance because Quinny just took the lion's share and very nearly took South Africa home. So I don't expect that team to change or the order to change against Bangladesh either. You look at it and he's probably trusting himself to turn the corner when he gets a proper opportunity to do so. And Zimbabwe just unfortunately wasn't. I'm sure he looked at it as a possible real confidence booster, but he's going to have to wait and do it again on Thursday.
Do you see the similarity between Temba and Kane Williamson's situation?
There is a bit, but Kane Williamson has got considerably more stock in the bank. That's the difference. I mean, there's no outcry in New Zealand about Kane Williamson's tempo because, and this is the thing, when someone has gone down a well-trodden path, experience buys you, time. And time in T20, in any form of cricket, time is everything. Kane Williamson, you could rattle off a dozen key performances when he played what we all deem normal cricket in abnormal circumstances, and at the end kicks in and looks like a hero because he's timed it so perfectly. I mean, 2019 World Cup, the chase against South Africa at Edgbaston, magnificent innings under huge pressure, and you looked at it and you thought New Zealand have exactly who they need in this situation. And he won the game for them, and he essentially kicked South Africa out the World Cup. So he's got that in the bank, and he can always refer to it. And if people talk about his tempo, he can look at it and say, don't look at my numbers, look at the number of games I've influenced. That's what international experience of that magnitude buys you. Temba's got some experience, but internationally, obviously, especially in limited overs, especially in chases, we haven't seen enough of that to be as comfortable, perhaps. But, there's similarities in the way that they play. There's similarities in the roles that they hold within their team and the amount of influence. But I think that the sleepless nights are more on Temba Bavuma's side than Kane Williamson's, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, so it's been a pretty damp start for the Proteas, but it's been a pretty good tournament for some other South Africans. Devin Conway, Curtis Campher, making magnificent unbeaten half-centuries. I mean, they were both brilliant innings. And Colin Ackerman and David Wiese almost getting the Netherlands and Namibia over the line. We were talking about the depth of South African cricket and being a net exporter of cricketers. It's yet another World Cup where we can, if we can't look at the South African team, we can look at South Africans elsewhere.
Yeah, there's no shortage. And like we keep saying, it is so refreshing to see, because we know, each and every one of those circumstances, why they've gone and played where they've played. And it's good to see, Devin Conway, everyone keeps on waiting for the honeymoon phase to be over, but, it's not a honeymoon phase. The guy can play. He's figured it out, he's really worked out his game and can make a double hundred at Test cricket and come and make a blitz of a 50 like he did. And it's just shifting through the gears. So it's exciting. It's exciting to see, and like we keep saying, there should be a sense of South African pride, because these are, a lot of these guys came through the system. Maybe they weren't ready to then take the all that labor and put it to use for South Africa. But they came through the system. They learned cricket in a unique environment, and to see them at least playing on the international stage for somebody is heartening, because you don't want to lose unique talents like that. And good luck to them. And well, maybe not so much good luck if they run into South Africa, but generally good luck to them, and long may they keep the flag flying.
You make a very good point about Devin Conway, and I think that I was amongst those who was guilty of. If not waiting for the honeymoon to end, I did think, he'll be found out. Give it a year at international cricket, and he'll be worked out. And it's not a question of bowlers and fielders and captains and tacticians not working him out. I think he's just getting better. I think he's staying ahead of the game, isn't he?
He's got his dream job. It's something that he's had on his mind since even before he finished high school. I would like to play cricket for a living, make runs to make rands, which have now turned into New Zealand dollars. But that's what I want to do with my life. And it was very nearly taken away, and he was considering, what did he say? It was either going to be working in construction or, like a bin man. And that's not to dismiss anybody who does an honest day's work as a bin man. But when you're blessed with that talent and and the issue in your career has been the mental block, which means you get to 30 looking like it's easy, and then the next 70 feel boring, so you give it away with a stupid shot because of a momentary lapse. He's taken away those momentary lapses of concentration, because he's figured out this is a job and I'm good enough to do it. I've done it around the world. I've got Kane Williamson, one of the greatest players ever, telling me how wonderful I am for the team. I've got a whole New Zealand culture saying, thank goodness this guy came when he came. You're the man. So it's taken away all of the insecurity. It's taken away so much. And it's just made him accountable, not just to himself, but to a team that expects him, because they say, you one of the best ball strikers in this team, so we want you to do a job, and he's doing it. And it's wonderful to see people's dreams come true, even if it's a bit later than they might have thought, because at least they figured it out, and they're not looking back as a 50-year-old saying, I had the prettiest cover drive in Pietermaritzburg. Yeah, you did, but now you've gone and done it at Lords, and now you're doing it at World Cup, and you're doing it. People can say he actually, at one stage in Maritzburg, he used to dominate the same way in club cricket that he's now doing internationally. And that's awesome.
Okay, we'll take another short break, and we'll be back to talk about what lies ahead for South Africa, and also look at what's happened in the tournament so far.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app, and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
Okay, so it's Bangladesh next. It's at the SCG, as we know. That offers some turn, and it has done already, actually, in the games that have been played at the SCG. It was a bit, it'll favour Bangladesh's spinners. The question is, do South Africa absolutely, at all stages, think we just get the win, just get some get some win points on the board, and forget net run rate? It's too early to think about that. Is it too early to think about that? Because I know that other teams are thinking about it. Oh, by the way, there's a 70% chance of rain on Thursday.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. The rain is going to follow them around now. Never mind net run rate. You're more worried about the weather. But this game has always been one that stood out for its potential for an upset. And that was before you figured that the Zimbabwe game would be a no result. So there's even more pressure, and there's even more freedom for Bangladesh to play with. A lot of pressure on South Africa because they haven't got out the blocks yet. And Bangladesh will see favourable conditions. We'll see a South African team that feels the need to get going into the tournament, and they haven't yet, and that anxiety doesn't help. And Bangladesh will look back and say, we've just beaten them in their own backyard. There's no fear. It was a surprise when they won in 2019, but since then, that win and the manner of it has given Bangladesh a renewed belief. Maybe not against everyone, but certainly when they play South Africa, especially on neutral ground, there is no fear. So it's a really dangerous game for South Africa, and if they can be as ruthless as they can be, and the weather permitting, get over the line, I think it'll be a massive confidence booster for them to say, there's pressure here. Every game has suddenly kind of become a bit of a must-win, like they played in the last World Cup. But this is a tricky team in conditions that will help and encourage a lot more of their players. So it's a massive game for South Africa.
Has the thought occurred to you that history may repeat itself? Just go back to this net run rate thing, because the last game of the group is against the Netherlands. You can see a situation where South Africa have to chase whatever it is down in sort of 15.2 overs. They've been there before.
Yeah, I think you can't not, especially when it starts raining like it has, and the group looks like it's going to be tight. It probably will come down to how much they beat the Netherlands by. But the only way you do that is to make sure that, first and foremost, you beat the teams in front of you to get yourself in a position where you can start doing calculations. I think the danger of trying to do calculations ahead and trying to be too cute can derail you sometimes, because you're trying to win so emphatically in this game that everyone plays loosely, like we saw in the last World Cup when there was almost a banana slip. So it's still important to do the basics and win. You can't control the weather. And if South Africa lose 2 games to rain and get knocked out of the competition on run rate, there's not really, you said control the controllables. You cannot control rain ruining 2 matches that you thought you had a really good chance of winning. That's just pure South African luck. So they can't lean so heavily and say, oh my goodness, we now have to desperately chase the run rate and get ahead of it because this one game against Zimbabwe cost us. You can't do it. You can't change what happened yesterday, but you can set yourself up for what happens in the rest of the tournament, weather permitting.
And final thoughts on the tournament so far? The preliminary group was excellent. I'm still sort of digesting the fact that the West Indies lost to Scotland and Ireland, and that they're not in the main draw. But it is. I don't know whether it's just because I didn't maybe pay as much attention to the first 7 T20 World Cups, but this one has made a cracking start, hasn't it?
It has, and I mean, we said when Namibia had won, we'd said that there looks to be the potential of others emulating them and their win over Sri Lanka, just because they've improved. They've improved, and any one of the so-called traditional superpowers who sort of in third gear and starting slowly they're vulnerable because all these smaller teams are well coached, highly motivated, and they know what they need to do. They've only got a couple of what you would call elite players, but that's all you need. Everyone else rallies around them and just scurries for everything. You can see the energy in the field. You can see the freedom that's been given to some of these players when they go out into the middle and bash the ball. It's this is the World Cup. It doesn't get better than this, and whoever's standing in your way actually doesn't matter. Like you're playing in a World Cup, something that most of them just never figured would happen. So it's wonderful to see, and if you lack motivation as a big team, you're going to find yourself behind the 8 ball very quickly, and it's hard. And you can see because of these big stadiums that they're playing in, the neutral Aussie fan is backing the minnow because it's a romantic cricket story. And you can hear the crowd change as they realize that here comes another upset, because it's fun to take the mickey out of somebody that you thought was supposed to win a big game. And now suddenly here's West Indies getting beaten, not just by Scotland, but by Ireland as well. It's good for the game. And as a neutral, it's awesome to watch because it keeps on reinforcing the message that you should be casting the net wider and giving more teams the tools to get better and then to come and compete and give us the surprises that make us keep wanting to watch sport.
Thank you for listening to South Africa on 99.94. We speak cricket every day. Please rate, review and subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcasts. You can download the 99.94 app and follow us on Twitter at Neil Manthorpe and at Whamzam17. We'll be back a little bit later with another podcast.